I'm Ben. I'm headed off to medical school in the fall, and I'm making a few videos in which I'll be talking about my med school application process, advice I have, all sorts of stuff. In this particular video, I'm going to talk about something that I think was critical for my process toward getting into medical school, critical for making my application seem strong, and critical for selling myself in essays, in interviews, and other things to the admissions committees. Now, what is this strategy that I'm going to be talking about here? That is one of characterizing yourself, self-characterization. And what do I mean by that? We do this all the time, I think. So, for example, before a big test, right? One might be feeling kind of lazy or not super interested in studying, but you think, well, I try to be a good student, and a good student, I suppose, would study for this test. Now, you might just be intrinsically motivated or whatever, but on occasion, right, you might feel that way. Or you might say, you know what, I should be a good family member to my folks, so I'm going to go ahead and spend time with them or whatever. People do this all the time, right? You draw on characterizations of kind of archetypes of people because those characterizations have reliable traits. A good student studies, right? A good family member spends time with their family. Because they have these reliable traits, you can draw on characterizations that have reliable connections to behavior. Now, it's ideal to do this a little bit also for yourself in your medical school application process, I think. To be clear, I don't know what I'm talking about. I, got in successfully to med school, and I did this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this was a great idea. So, big caveat, if you don't feel like this is going to work for you, certainly, take with a grain of salt. But what do I mean by characterizing yourself? I mean that individuals, unless you know them so well or they're so well known in general, such that they become characterizations themselves, a sort of like, what would so and so do, right? Unless they go to that degree where people feel like they know that individual so well, they don't have reliable behavior traits, right? If you don't know me that well, even if I tell you, well, I'm going to go and study, you don't necessarily know that I am that way. But if you know that I'm a good student, you might predict that I would go and study. So, how can you characterize yourself in your medical school application process? This should go beyond, I think, I'm a good student, right? What you want to do in general is you want to build a clear and consistent story of who you are. Not just what you've done. Maybe you've been an EMT, maybe you've done some shadowing, maybe you've been a scribe, maybe you've done some research. That's all awesome stuff. A lot of pre-meds have done that kind of thing. And it's really exciting and valuable work. But what you want to do is you want to draw a clear, consistent picture of not just what you've done, but who you are. Because if you can characterize who you are, they can draw from that reliable behavior traits and reliable behaviors that they expect to continue in medical school and beyond. I'll use my application as an example, not necessarily that I, had no, incredible application or something. That's not what I'm trying to say, but just that I tried to do this, and I'll talk about how I tried to do it. For me, I'm big on psychiatry. I'm a big psychiatry guy. I'm also interested in research and leadership and some other things. So one option for me and how I initially started doing my med school apps was I just talked about, oh, I've done such and such research. And I've talked about, oh, I've done such and such kind of leadershipy initiatives. And I've done this shadowing and that kind of clinical type work and that sort of thing. Right? And in the personal statement, I talked about the experiences that I had had that made me personally driven to kind of go into medicine in general. But the trouble with that, and that's all, fine and good, but the trouble with that is that you don't end up with a clear picture of who I am. You know a list of the things that I've done, but you don't know who I am as a person and what really motivates me. So how did I change it up a little bit? I said, you know what? I want to draw a characterization, and this is true. This is a legitimate characterization. I was like, who am I to them, right? To other people and all sorts of things. But to them, I'm a student who's interested in going into leadership in academic medicine. That's my main goal, and that's the characterization in psychiatry specifically, and that's the story that I want to tell all throughout. So in my personal statement, I talk about experiences that I had had that drove me towards science, drove me towards psychiatry, and stated very clearly this is a path that took me toward leadership in academic medicine in the field of psychiatry. This experience that I had took me there. In my activities section, I said, well, this was the first research project that I ever did. It was really amazing and helped me discover that I was really interested in a career in research, which is playing into my current interests in a career in leadership in academic medicine research in the field of psychiatry. In my discussion of maybe working as an EMT, doing some clinical work. These amazing conversations that, I was fortunately able, I shouldn't say fortunately, I had a different video about talking about patients, but these amazing conversations that I was, frankly, fortunate to be able to have with really spectacular people, in the ambulance, for example, helped drive my interest towards psychiatry, which is playing into my current interest in leadership in academic medicine, the field of psychiatry, right? Now, I wasn't so ridiculously repetitive in that way, but I was absolutely repetitive. I said academic medicine, leadership, psychiatry, research. I said those buzzwords over and over, and I said those also in my interviews. You say, well, tell me about yourself, all this stuff. So I talk about my background. Oh, my parents are kind of academics, really cool people, and such and such. And here's how I ended up looking toward a future in academic medicine in the field of psychiatry and leadership. So the point is, what I tried to do is in my personal statement, create a story, not of who I've done, including that, but not just what I've done, but who I am, what motivates me. So even beyond just saying over and over that I want to go into some particular field, right? You want to also try to characterize what motivates you. So I said, I personally am interested in certain kinds of problems. I'm interested in certain kinds of research questions. I'm interested in certain ways of interacting with people. Those are core traits, right, of me. I'm curious about this. I'm interested in that. Core traits. And those core traits kind of lead me to this clear and consistent story of of having this particular trajectory. The value of that, right, again, is that they can look at the trajectory you've been on. They can say, okay, all these things that you've done, we feel like maybe are putting you along this path. And we expect that while in med school, you'll keep going with that path because that's kind of who you are. And beyond that, you'll keep going with that path, right? I know a lot of people who've also done this really well. One of my best friends, my roommate in college, Francisco, is a big kind of emergency medicine trauma kind of, he's trying to go into trauma surgery or maybe some other kinds of surgery, but super intense guy, really, really spectacular, total genius. And for him, his big thing was EMS, right? He did a ton of EMT work, a ton of other kinds of cool work too. But throughout his application, he talks all the time about his experiences as an EMT and how that's driving him toward this particular future, the things that he cares deeply about, characterizing himself as a kind of person that's going that way. And he got into medical school. So the point is that if you can, throughout your application, try to develop and return to a clear story of who you are. That'll help differentiate you from the other applicants that might have had similar experiences, and it'll help medical school admissions committees, I think, I don't know, I'm not on them. I believe it'll help them understand or imagine who you might be in their med school and who you might be in your career. I think that'll help your application. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Take care and good luck to you.